First things first, is this a good bike? Well, yes. Most bikes these days are honestly pretty reliable, pretty good, well built. You don't tend to have a lot of problems with them, especially a Honda. They're known for their reliability. That being said, there is a lot more to that. So is it a good bike? Yes. Is it capable? Yes. But are there ups and downs about it? 100%, and we're gonna go over those. This is my first time doing voiceover, so let's just keep that in mind. So this bike, we'll start with some of the negatives first. The thing is about this bike is that in this type of single track, which is pretty much some of the hardest riding you'll do, this bike is, pretty hefty and one of the heavier bikes out there. I mean, I remember this track here. This was actually difficult for all of us just because of how random and awkward the terrain was. It was very bumpy. It's hard to see on the video, but we were all kind of struggling here. And with the bigger bikes, I mean, there's no way around it. You're not just going to cruise through the woods and this kind of stuff, and you might sweat a little more. This isn't really four-stroke territory anyways to begin with, especially the big bore bikes, so just keep that in mind. We don't ride this type of stuff all the time. This bike is more of an all-around bike, and I didn't buy it specifically for riding tight single track. Let's talk about flame outs. This is one.
What the fuck was that?
Yeah, so all I did there was I tried to just give it a little bit of throttle to get up the other side of the hill, and that's when it died. It also happens right after this. The engine is hot.
Oh, fuck, this thing is getting
So that's the kind of thing that you'll experience on this bike, especially in its stock form, because it has a very light flywheel on it, and the tuning is super lean to meet emissions and all this thing. Even with a tuner on it, it still does it once in a while. It did improve slightly after I did put the JD tuner on. I am hoping that once I install the heavier flywheel weight onto the flywheel, then it will actually help this symptom. So I would say the bare minimum for riding this type of terrain, this type of track, go get some big knobby tires for it, put some heavy duty tubes in, and definitely gear it down, put a 53 tooth sprocket on the rear, and change that chain out, and you'll be good to go for this type of thing. So with that being said, let's get into what this bike does perform well at. So since it is a very comfortable highway bike, it is good for higher speeds, that kind of thing. This also comes into play when doing big hill climbs. It's got a good amount of power, good amount of torque, and it will carry you up the hill just fine. Now with the suspension and everything being set up the way it is, this does actually help you when you're going over large rocks and rough terrain. So how does it compare to other bikes? Well, obviously the weight is going to be a factor, and the steering geometry, which I mentioned before, is something to keep in mind as well, with just the way that the bike handles the characteristics. A lot of people say that the Japanese bikes in general tend to feel very similar to the Honda. If you've tried any of those, the only one that I've really had experience with and had some time on a trail with is the DRZ400, and I did notice that the characteristics of that bike was also very consistent with the Honda, mostly just the weight distribution, the way that it soaks up the bumps, and is very comfortable. It doesn't vibrate a lot, doesn't toss you around, all that kind of thing. They're very good bikes, and they might be a little bit more jarring, but I mean, when I get on one, I feel like a better rider immediately. The KTMs, the Euro bikes in general, seem to have the weight towards the rear, which makes it a very fun and playful bike, and it's really fun to, you know, get the front end in the air and you can really show off, and it feels really great when you're on one. But also the other thing is that these bikes are several $1,000s more expensive, so keep that in mind as well. So this bike does have a cable clutch, which is not that great. Great for motocross, not great for riding trails. First of all, the throttle response being a little bit ridiculous, and the cable clutch. The engagement point is all wrong, and it is harsh engagement. There are conversion kits to switch them over to hydraulic. However, I have not done that to mine because it is kind of an expensive conversion. And at this point, I'm just kind of used to the cable clutch. But after trying some of the other bikes that my friends own, definitely jealous of the hydraulic clutch for sure.
So in conclusion, the reason I made this video was because when I was trying to purchase this bike, I noticed that a lot of the reviews were very focused on street riding or very mild dirt riding. I didn't really see a whole lot of guys reviewing these bikes that were doing anything outside of that. I did see a few reviews, people riding in the desert on sort of rocky, sandy stuff, a little bit of track stuff. But for the stuff that we ride, it's a lot different than that. So I figured I would just sort of make this video and sort of contribute and show some footage of the types of things that we ride on and let people know how the bike is in those conditions. Now you can see some of my other videos on the YouTube channel. I do post some of the bigger rides on a different playlist on this channel, so you can go check those out. And I hope that you enjoyed this review and that you found it insightful and hopefully helped you decide whether or not you will be buying one or not buying one. And thanks for watching.